Some places don't feel dangerous. They don't look wrong. They don't try to scare you. You check in. You follow the rules. And when it's time to leave, you leave. At least, that's what you think. But sometimes, the problem isn't getting out of a place. It's convincing the system that you ever did. Tonight's stories aren't about monsters in the woods. They're about campgrounds that never let you check out, rules designed for safety, records that refuse to close, and people who did everything right, but are still listed as being there. Before we begin, comment where you're watching from and what time it is right now, because once these stories start, leaving won't feel as simple anymore. I've been camping long enough to know the difference between a bad idea and an inconvenient one. This trip didn't feel like either. I wasn't trying to disappear into the wilderness or push myself. I just wanted 2 quiet nights somewhere I could park, set up a small tent, and shut my phone off for a while. Nothing remote, nothing extreme. Just a short break before another long stretch of work. That's why I booked through the official site. I didn't scroll through sketchy forums or follow vague directions from strangers online. I went to the same government-managed reservation system I'd used dozens of times before. Same layout, same fonts, same painfully slow loading screens. The campground had a normal name, no ominous wording, no creepy reputation. Just a state-run site listed as open seasonally. I picked 2 nights. Entered my information, paid with my credit card. Within seconds, I got the confirmation email. It had everything you'd expect: a booking ID, a map attachment, a list of rules about quiet hours, fire restrictions, and wildlife safety. There was even a reminder about checking out on time so the next campers wouldn't be delayed. That detail stuck with me later. At the time, it meant nothing. I skimmed the email, saved it, and added the dates to my calendar. The campground didn't have many reviews, but that wasn't unusual. Smaller sites didn't always get traffic, especially ones a few hours off the highway. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt wrong. The day before I left, I printed the map. Old habit. Cell service could be unreliable, and I liked having paper backups. The directions were straightforward. Exit the highway, follow a forest road for about 12 miles, then turn off onto a narrower access road that led directly into the campground. I checked the weather. Clear skies, cool nights. I packed light. Tent, sleeping bag, food for 2 days, extra water. The usual checklist I'd refined over years of doing this without incident. Before bed that night, I opened the confirmation email one more time, just to double-check the address. At the bottom, beneath the standard "no refund" policy, there was a line I hadn't noticed before. "Thank you for choosing to stay with us." It was such a normal sentence that I didn't even question who "us" was supposed to be. I closed my laptop, set my alarm, and went to sleep thinking about nothing more than the drive ahead and how quiet it was going to be once I got there. That was the last part of the trip that felt completely normal. I left early the next morning. Not because I was excited, but because I wanted to arrive with enough daylight to set up without rushing. The drive was exactly what the map said it would be. Highway, exit ramp, a long stretch of forest road that slowly narrowed as the trees pressed closer on both sides. For the first 10 miles, there were occasional signs, trail markers, warnings about fire restrictions, one faded sign reminding drivers to watch for deer. Everything felt maintained, not pristine, but not abandoned either. The last 2 miles were different. The road became uneven, patched in places where asphalt had cracked and been filled just enough to keep it passable. Branches scraped lightly against the sides of my car. I slowed down, more annoyed than concerned, assuming this was just what happened when a road didn't get much traffic. Then I saw the sign. It was mounted on 2 metal posts at the edge of a small clearing, exactly where the map said the entrance would be. The campground name was printed cleanly across the top. Beneath it, a list of rules and a familiar government logo I'd seen on dozens of other sites. No graffiti, no damage, no faded lettering, I pulled in. The campground itself was laid out in a simple loop. A handful of campsites spaced evenly apart, fire pits made of stacked stone, picnic tables that looked weathered but solid. What stood out immediately wasn't what I saw, it was what I didn't. There were no other cars, no tents, no smoke rising from any of the fire pits, no voices carrying through the trees. Even the usual background noise you get at campsites felt muted, like the forest was holding its breath. I parked near the first available site and got out. The air smelled like damp soil and pine. Somewhere deeper in the woods, I could hear a stream, slow and steady. Everything looked ready. Not freshly prepared, but clearly not forgotten. The bathroom building sat near the center of the loop. I walked over, half expecting the door to be locked. It wasn't. Inside, the lights came on automatically. The floor was clean. The sinks worked. There was fresh paper in the dispensers. Someone had even restocked the soap. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it left me with a strange, unsettled feeling I couldn't quite name. Back outside, I noticed the trash bins. They weren't overflowing. In fact, they'd clearly been emptied recently. The liners were new, the lids shut tight. I checked my phone. No service. That wasn't surprising, but it meant I couldn't double-check anything online. Still, I had the printed map. I had the confirmation email saved offline. Everything matched what I was seeing. I chose a site near the edge of the loop and started setting up my tent. As the sun dipped lower, the shadows stretched long across the ground. I worked slowly, deliberately, giving myself time to notice anything else that felt off. There were footprints near the fire pit. Not fresh, but not old enough to be washed away either. The kind that suggested someone had been here recently, maybe earlier that day. I told myself it was nothing. People came and went. Maybe I'd just missed them. By the time I finished setting up, the campground was still completely empty. No headlights on the road, no sound of an engine, no sign that anyone else was arriving for the night. I stood there for a moment, listening. The forest was quiet, but not dead. Insects chirped, leaves rustled faintly in the breeze. It was normal enough that leaving felt unnecessary. The sky was already starting to darken, and the idea of driving all the way back out on that narrow road didn't appeal to me. I'd booked this place. I was supposed to be here. I started a small fire and cooked a simple meal, watching the flames dance as night settled in around the loop. As the last light faded from the sky, one thought kept circling in my mind. This place didn't feel abandoned. It felt unattended. I woke up sometime after midnight. Not because of a noise, not because of a nightmare. I woke up because the campground felt different. It's hard to explain without sounding dramatic, but the air itself felt active, like something had shifted while I was asleep. I lay there for a moment, listening, trying to pinpoint what had changed. That's when I noticed the light. A soft, white glow leaked through the thin fabric of my tent, steady and unmoving. I checked my watch. Just after 12:30 a.m. The bathroom lights were on. That wasn't unusual on its own. Plenty of campgrounds kept them lit overnight. What bothered me was that earlier in the evening, they'd been on a motion sensor. They shut off after a few minutes of inactivity. I sat up and unzipped the tent just enough to look out. The loop road was empty. No headlights. No shadows moving between the sites. Just the bathroom building, lit up like it was expecting someone. I stepped out of the tent. The night was calm, no wind, no sudden forest sounds. Even the insects seemed quieter than before. My footsteps sounded too loud as I walked across the gravel. Inside the bathroom, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Clean sinks, dry floors, no sign anyone else had been there. The lights stayed on the entire time. Back at my campsite, I tried to shake off the unease and get some sleep. I zipped the tent closed, lay back down and stared at the ceiling. That's when my phone buzzed. I froze. There was no service out here. I'd checked multiple times. I picked up the phone slowly, half expecting the screen to be blank. It wasn't. I had an email. The subject line read, "Hope you're enjoying your stay." It was from the same address that had sent my confirmation. The message itself was short, too short. Just a reminder that quiet hours begin at 10 p.m. Please ensure all fires are extinguished before turning in for the night. I checked the timestamp, 12:47 a.m. I hadn't logged into anything. I hadn't checked in anywhere. There was no way the system should have known I was still there, awake, with a fire recently burning. I put the phone down and listened. Somewhere in the distance, a light clicked off, then another. I unzipped the tent again. The bathroom lights were still on, but the small pathway lights along the loop road had gone dark, one by one, moving steadily away from my sight, not flickering, not failing, turning off, in sequence. I stayed where I was, heart pounding, watching until the last light disappeared into the trees. After that, the campground was completely dark. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I started to drift off, I felt like I was being monitored, not watched in the usual sense, but tracked, counted, logged. At some point near dawn, my phone buzzed again. Another email. Thank you for complying with campground guidelines. That was it. No name, no signature. When the sky finally began to lighten, I packed up faster than I'd planned. I told myself I'd leave at first light, drive until I had service, and call someone. A ranger, anyone. As I loaded the last of my gear into the car, I glanced once more toward the bathroom building. The lights were off. The door stood open. And for the first time since I'd arrived, the campground felt like it knew I was leaving. I didn't stop until I had service. It took almost an hour of driving before the first bar appeared on my phone. I pulled over immediately, gravel crunching under the tires, and checked the time. Just after 8 a.m., I had 3 missed notifications. 2 were automated. One from my credit card company confirming the charge from the campground. Another was a generic, "Thanks for staying with us" message, time-stamped at 6:02 a.m. The third was a voicemail. I hadn't noticed the call come through. I listened to it with the window rolled down, morning air rushing in like it could ground me back in reality. "Hi, this is Park Services returning your call," a woman said. Her voice was calm, professional. "We see you attempted to contact us overnight. If this concerns an active safety issue, please contact a ranger directly." Active. That word bothered me. I followed the directions she left and drove to the nearest ranger station listed on the map. It was a small building off the main road, the kind you'd expect to see on a brochure. Flag out front. Visitor information posted by the door. Inside, a ranger sat behind the desk, flipping through paperwork. I explained everything. The booking, the empty campground, the emails. I watched her expression shift as soon as I said the campground's name. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. She didn't interrupt me. She just nodded slowly, letting me finish. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair. "That site isn't staffed anymore," she said. "Hasn't been for years." I asked what that meant. She chose her words carefully. It was decommissioned. Too many complications. I pressed her, asked why it was still online, why I could still book it. She shook her head. "It shouldn't be." I showed her the confirmation email, the booking ID, the charge on my card. She stared at the screen longer than I expected. "That's an old merchant account," she said quietly. "It's supposed to be dormant." Dormant. I asked her who maintained the bathrooms, who emptied the trash. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked me something else. "Did you stay the night?" I nodded. Her jaw tightened. "That was a mistake," she said. "Once someone checks in, the system assumes occupancy until an exit is logged." I told her I'd left, that I was here, standing in front of her. She met my eyes. Leaving and being recorded as leaving aren't the same thing. I asked her what I was supposed to do. She hesitated, then sighed. "Technically, you'd need to return to the campground and complete a proper checkout." The words landed heavy. I told her there was no one there, no booth, no ranger. She looked down at the desk. "There used to be." I asked who used to work there. She shook her head. That information isn't public anymore. I could feel the logic closing in on itself. Go back to a place that didn't officially exist anymore, so the system could acknowledge that I'd left. What happens if I don't? I asked. She tapped her keyboard, pulling something up on her screen. Then you'll remain listed as an active occupant, she said. That affects permits, future reservations, in some cases, fines. I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. You're telling me I'm trapped in a database. Her expression didn't change. I'm telling you the system doesn't forget, she said, and it doesn't like unresolved stays. I left the station with more questions than answers. As I drove away, my phone buzzed again. A new email. Reminder, checkout time was 11 a.m. I checked the clock on my dashboard. It was 9:17 a.m. I had less than 2 hours left to decide whether I was going back. I didn't go back. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving the ranger station, staring at the road ahead like it might offer a better option if I waited long enough. Every version of going back played out the same way in my head, driving into that empty loop, standing in front of a booth that didn't exist, trying to check out of a place that no longer acknowledged people. I chose distance instead. I drove home. For a while, life went back to normal. Work deadlines, grocery runs, messages from friends asking how the trip went. I told them it was quiet, uneventful. I didn't mention the emails, or the ranger, or the way the campground felt aware of me. 2 weeks later, my credit card statement came in. There was another charge, same merchant name, same campground, labeled maintenance fee. I called the bank. They put me on hold, transferred me twice, then told me the charge was valid. The account was active, ongoing. I filed a dispute anyway. It was denied. I tried logging back into the reservation system. The campground wasn't there anymore. The page redirected to a generic error message, like it had never existed in the first place. But the emails didn't stop. Once a month, always at night, I'd get a reminder. Your stay is still active. I replied to one of them, explaining everything. No response. I called Park Services again. A different ranger answered this time. When I gave the booking ID, there was a long pause on the line. That stay is still open, she said. We show no record of exit. I told her I'd never gone back. She lowered her voice. Most people don't. I asked her what happened to the ones who did. She didn't answer. The fees kept coming. Small amounts. Easy to ignore. Easy enough that canceling the card felt like more trouble than it was worth. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Final notice. It stated that my stay had exceeded its allotted duration. That failure to complete checkout procedures could result in penalties. At the bottom, in smaller text, was a sentence that made my stomach drop. Unresolved occupancy may affect future access. I stopped camping after that. Not because I was afraid of the woods, because sometimes, when I open my email late at night, there's a message waiting for me. Annual reminder, you are still listed as checked in. The campground doesn't exist anymore, but according to the system, I never left. We weren't lost. That's important to understand from the beginning. We were exactly where we were supposed to be, following a route we'd driven before, on a stretch of highway that barely registered as dangerous in my mind. It was supposed to be the easiest part of the trip, a long, quiet drive through forest land before pulling into an RV park just before sunset. The radio crackled with a weather update as we drove. Fire activity reported north of Highway 47. Motorists are advised to remain alert. It sounded routine, the kind of warning you hear every summer and promptly forget. My wife glanced up from her phone. That's not us, right? I checked the map on the dashboard screen. We're south of that. We're fine. 10 minutes later, we saw the sign. It stood on the shoulder of the road, freshly planted, bright orange against the green wall of trees. Large black letters read, "Emergency detour, official use." Below it, an arrow pointed left toward a narrow road I didn't recognize. I slowed down instinctively. There was another sign just past it, smaller but unmistakably official. County seal, route number, reflective paint that caught the headlights just right. No handwritten warnings, no makeshift barriers. This wasn't someone's idea of a prank. Up ahead, traffic had already slowed to a crawl. A line of cars funneled toward the detour, guided by cones that hadn't been there the last time we drove this road. "Did you see this on the map?" my wife asked. I shook my head. "No, but that doesn't mean anything. They don't update detours fast." A police cruiser sat at the edge of the turnoff, lights flashing but no officer visible. The message was clear enough without one. I followed the car ahead of us onto the detour road. The pavement narrowed almost immediately. The trees closed in, branches arching overhead like they were trying to reclaim the road. Within a few hundred yards, we lost cell service. The radio cut out next. Not completely, just enough that the voices dissolved into static. We drove in silence for a minute, then another. I expected to see more signs, more cars, some indication of where this road was supposed to reconnect. Instead, there was only forest. After a mile or so, we passed another sign. Same color, same lettering, same arrow. Emergency detour route 47. It was identical to the first one. "That's weird," my wife said. "Didn't we already pass that?" "Probably just another marker," I said, though my confidence felt rehearsed. The road dipped, then curved sharply. The RV rocked slightly as the pavement grew uneven. No guardrails, no shoulder, just asphalt cutting through trees that looked older than the highway itself. We didn't see another car, not ahead, not behind. The feeling crept in slowly, subtle enough that I didn't question it at first. This detour didn't feel temporary, it felt permanent, and yet, it wasn't on any map we had. The first thing I checked was the GPS. The screen showed our RV still moving along Highway 47, the familiar blue line stretching forward exactly where it should have been. According to the map, we hadn't turned anywhere. We were still on the main road. I zoomed in, then out. The road we were physically on didn't exist. "That's not right," I muttered. My wife leaned forward to look. "Maybe it hasn't updated yet. Detours don't erase highways," I said, more to reassure myself than her. The forest thickened as we drove. The trees were packed so tightly together that the light changed, dimming into a flat gray tone that made it hard to tell how fast we were moving. The RV's engine echoed strangely. The sound swallowed and reflected in ways I couldn't place. A mile marker appeared on the right side of the road. Mile 12. I didn't remember seeing mile markers on this stretch before, but I let it go. Rural roads reused signage all the time. A few minutes later, we passed another marker. Mile 12. Identical. Same dents. Same faded paint. I slowed the RV to a crawl. "That's the same one," my wife said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, I know." The radio crackled back to life for a moment. "Fire activity has been contained." The voice cut out mid-sentence, replaced by static that rose and fell like breathing. Contained or not, the smell of smoke was stronger now. It seeped through the vents, faint but unmistakable. I considered turning around. That's when we saw the next sign. Emergency detour route 47. The arrow pointed straight ahead. There was no side road, no junction, just the same narrow strip of asphalt continuing deeper into the forest. "Detour to where?" my wife asked. I didn't answer. The GPS recalculated. A soft chime sounded, then the screen froze. When it came back, our location was marked by a gray circle with no label. No road name, no route number, just a dot. I tried my phone. No service. No emergency call option, just the quiet confirmation that we were offline. Another mile marker passed. Mile 12. My chest tightened. I watched it disappear in the side mirror, half expecting it to still be there when I looked again. The forest was completely still now. No birds, no wind, just the low hum of the engine and the faint rattle of dishes in the cabinets behind us. "This road isn't taking us anywhere," my wife said. "It's keeping us here." I didn't argue. Up ahead, the road dipped sharply, then leveled out. The RV lurched slightly as we crossed the low point, and for a brief moment the GPS flickered. The map snapped into place. We were no longer on Highway 47. We weren't on any highway at all. The screen displayed a blank background, our vehicle icon hovering in empty space. Below it, a single line of text appeared: rerouting. It never finished. I took my foot off the accelerator and let the RV slow to a stop. The silence pressed in immediately, thick and heavy. Somewhere behind us, far down the road, I thought I saw headlights. But when I checked the mirror again, there was nothing there, just trees. And a road that, according to every system we trusted, did not exist. I didn't want to stop there. Every instinct told me that pulling over on a road that didn't exist was worse than continuing forward. At least while we were moving, we still felt like part of something. Traffic, evacuation, a process. So I pressed the accelerator again. The RV crept forward, tires humming against the asphalt. Almost immediately, the GPS chimed softly, as if relieved we'd made the right choice. Rerouting, the screen said again. This time, a thin gray line appeared ahead of us. Not a road, just a suggestion of one. We followed it. A few minutes later, another sign came into view. Emergency detour continue for safety. No route number this time, just an instruction. I slowed down, scanning the roadside for anything else. A pullout, a gate, a barricade. There was nothing, just trees packed tight, their trunks dark and straight like they'd been planted intentionally. My wife broke the silence. "Who put these up?" "Probably county crews," I said automatically. "But which county?" I didn't have an answer. The radio crackled again, clearer this time. "All motorists currently on alternate routes are advised to remain in motion." The message repeated once, then dissolved into static. "Remain in motion," my wife echoed. "That's not advice, that's an order." As if on cue, the RV's dashboard lit up with a warning chime. A message flashed briefly across the screen. "Idle time warning." I stared at it, confused. We'd only slowed down earlier. The engine hadn't been off long enough to trigger anything like that. The message disappeared before I could read more. The road straightened out, stretching ahead in a long, unbroken line. No turns, no intersections, no landmarks. We drove like that for what felt like an hour. The fuel gauge hadn't moved. Neither had the clock. I checked my watch. Same time as before. "That's impossible," I said. My wife looked at her phone. Mine too. Another mile marker slid past the window. Mile 12. The same one. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't a loop. It was a hold. We weren't being sent anywhere. We were being kept moving. Up ahead, the trees thinned just enough to reveal something on the road. A vehicle. A dark SUV stopped in the middle of the lane. Relief surged through me so fast it almost hurt. I flashed my headlights and slowed down. As we got closer, I noticed there were no hazard lights. No driver visible through the windshield. The SUV was perfectly clean. No dust, no plates, just parked. I rolled down my window and leaned out. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. My wife grabbed my arm. "Don't get out." The radio burst to life again, loud enough to make us both flinch. "Do not stop," the voice said flatly. "Continue along the designated route." The SUV's brake lights flickered on. Then it started moving. It pulled forward at exactly the same speed as us, maintaining a precise distance, like it was guiding us rather than driving away. I tried to slow down. So did it. I sped up. It did the same. We were locked together, two vehicles moving through a forest that refused to change. The GPS updated again. Our vehicle icon snapped directly behind the SUV. A label appeared beneath it. "Following official vehicle." I felt my hands tighten around the wheel. Whatever this road was, it wasn't lost. It was controlled. And now, It knew we were here. I tried calling 911. The call connected instantly, which surprised me. Usually out here, you're lucky if you get a ringtone. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. I kept my eyes on the road and spoke carefully. We're on an emergency detour off Highway 47. We've been driving for a long time and can't find our way back. There's an official vehicle in front of us. There was a pause. Not a dropped call, not static, just silence. Sir, the dispatcher said slowly, can you confirm your current location? I glanced at the GPS. Still nothing but a gray background and our icon locked behind the SUV. I can't, I admitted. Our navigation system says the road doesn't exist. Another pause. Are you currently stopped? No, I said. We were told to remain in motion. Her breathing changed. Not much, just enough that I noticed. Who told you that? The radio and the signs. Sir, she said, choosing each word carefully. There are no active evacuation orders on Highway 47. My grip tightened on the wheel. That's not what the signs say. There are no emergency detours logged in our system for that area, she replied. No county, state, or federal notices. The SUV ahead of us slowed slightly. I matched its speed without thinking. There's a vehicle in front of us, I said. No plates, it's guiding us. Is it a marked law enforcement vehicle? It doesn't have any markings at all. Silence again. Then quietly, Sir, you're already off the evacuation route. What does that mean? I asked. It means whatever road you're on, she said, is not one we can track. The radio crackled to life over her voice. All motorists are advised not to stop. The dispatcher inhaled sharply. I didn't say that, she said. That transmission didn't come from us. The SUV ahead of us suddenly turned off the road, disappearing between the trees where there was no visible path. My heart slammed against my ribs. What do I do? I asked. Her answer came after a long delay. If you see an opportunity to exit, she said, take it, and do not follow unmarked vehicles. The call dropped. For the first time since we'd turned onto the detour, the radio went silent. No static, no instructions, just nothing. The GPS flickered. The thin gray line vanished, replaced by a blinking arrow that spun slowly, as if searching for something to lock onto. I saw it then. A break in the trees, narrow, easy to miss, not marked by any sign or cone. I turned the wheel before I could second-guess myself. The RV bounced violently as we left the asphalt and rolled onto uneven dirt. Branches scraped along the sides, leaves slapping against the windshield. Behind us, the road stayed perfectly smooth and straight. Too smooth. I didn't look back again until we burst out onto a paved road 10 minutes later. A real road, with lane markers, with a mile sign that read, Mile 13. I pulled over immediately and shut off the engine. My hands were shaking. My phone buzzed. A text message, unknown sender. You have exited the detour. Below it, in smaller text, unauthorized deviation recorded. I stared at the screen, chest tight. Whatever system had put us on that road had noticed we'd left, and it didn't sound pleased. We didn't talk for a long time after that. I drove until we reached a small town with lights and open businesses. The kind of place that feels aggressively normal when you've just come from somewhere else. We parked in a grocery store lot and sat there, engine off, listening to it tick as it cooled. My wife finally broke the silence. That road wasn't a detour. No, I said, it was a filter. We finished the trip without incident, reached the RV park late, told the owner we'd been delayed by a fire warning. He nodded like he'd heard it before. Life moved on, for a while. 2 months later, I was sorting through footage from the dash cam, clearing space on the memory card. Most of it was unremarkable highway driving, the kind of thing I usually delete without watching. Then I saw the folder, ALT_ROUTE 47. I didn't name my files like that. Inside were dozens of short clips, each only a few seconds long. Most showed the road ahead, framed perfectly in the center of the camera. No timestamps, no GPS data embedded. Except for one detail. In every clip, the speed readout was the same, 45 miles per hour. Exactly. I played one of the clips all the way through. At the end, just before it cut out, the SUV's brake lights flared. I checked another clip, same thing. Every recording ended the same way, as if the camera had been instructed to stop once we reached a certain point. I scrolled further down the folder. There was one last file, EXIT_ATTEMPT. The video was shaky, filmed during the moment we turned off the road. Branches scraping the windshield, the sudden jolt as we left the asphalt. And then, for a single frame, the road behind us. It wasn't empty. The SUV was gone. In its place, the road was filled with signs, dozens of them. Emergency detour, remain in motion, official use only. They stretched back into the trees as far as the headlights reached, all perfectly aligned, all facing forward. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time. A week later, a letter arrived from the Department of Transportation. It thanked me for participating in a temporary traffic redirection test. No explanation, no contact number, just a single sentence near the bottom of the page. Data collection complete. Since then, every time we drive through wildfire country, I notice the signs more than I used to. I pay attention to which ones look temporary and which ones look permanent, because now I know the difference, and I know what happens when you follow the wrong one. The campsite was assigned to us. That's the detail I keep coming back to when I replay everything in my head. We didn't wander off trail. We didn't sneak into a restricted area. We checked in properly, showed our permit, and followed the map exactly as it was printed. Site C17. It sat near the edge of the campground, far enough from the main road that the noise faded into a dull hum by nightfall. Tall pines ringed the clearing, their trunks evenly spaced, like they'd been measured instead of grown. We arrived just before sunset. The ranger at the entrance booth barely looked up when he handed back our paperwork. He circled the site number with a pen and said, "You're good through Sunday." Nothing about weather warnings, nothing about closures. We set up camp as the light drained from the sky. The air was cool but calm, the kind of evening that makes you feel like you made the right choice getting away. By the time the fire was going, the campground had gone quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but I didn't think much of it then. It was just after dark when the ranger walked into our site. I didn't hear him approach. No footsteps on gravel, no crunch of pine needles. He was just there, standing at the edge of the firelight like he'd stepped out of the trees fully formed. "Evening," he said. He wore the standard uniform, green shirt, shoulder patch, radio clipped to his chest. Everything about him fit so perfectly that my first reaction was relief. "Evening," I replied. "Everything okay?" He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "I'm doing a quick sweep, just making sure folks are settled." He glanced at our permit hanging from the tent, then at the fire. "How long you planning to stay here tonight?" he asked. "Just the night," I said. "We're moving on in the morning." His eyes lingered on the tree line behind us. "You shouldn't stay here tonight," he said. The way he said it wasn't urgent. It wasn't panicked. It was matter of fact, like he was correcting a minor mistake. My wife looked at me. "Is there a problem?" The ranger hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. "There's been some activity," he said. "Nothing dangerous yet, but this site isn't ideal." "For what?" I asked. He shifted his weight, the radio on his chest crackling softly, though no voice came through. "For your safety," he said. He pointed down the road, away from the numbered sites. "Pack up and move to the overflow area near the creek. It's quieter there." I frowned. That wasn't on the map. He gave a thin smile. Maps don't get updated as fast as conditions change. The explanation made sense. Too much sense. "Is it required?" my wife asked. The ranger looked at her. then back at me. "I strongly recommend it," he said. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." He stepped back into the darkness, already turning away. "You'll want to move before it gets any later," he added. "I wouldn't stay here after full dark." Then he was gone. No goodbye, no follow-up. Just the fire crackling and the sudden weight of a decision we hadn't planned to make. We sat there for a few minutes after he left, staring into the fire like it might give us an answer. Neither of us wanted to be the first to say it, but the implication hung in the air. Someone in authority had told us to move. Not suggested, not advised, strongly recommended. That carried weight. "I don't like this," my wife said finally, "but I like staying after he warned us even less." I nodded. "If something happens and we ignored him..." I didn't finish the sentence. We put the fire out carefully, pouring water until the embers hissed and collapsed. The forest beyond the light seemed to lean in as we packed, branches creaking softly overhead. Every sound felt amplified now, like the woods were paying attention. By the time we loaded the last of our gear, it was fully dark. The road out of the numbered campsites was barely lit, the beam of our headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the trees. We drove slowly, watching for the sign the ranger had mentioned. The overflow area wasn't marked. No reflective post, no arrow, just a break in the trees where the dirt widened into a rough clearing beside the creek. If we hadn't been looking for it, we would have driven straight past. "This doesn't feel like an official site," my wife said. "It's probably temporary," I replied, though the words sounded thin even to me. The ground was uneven, sloping slightly toward the water. Old tire tracks crisscrossed the dirt, but there were no numbered posts, no fire rings, no sign of recent use. We parked anyway. Getting set up again in the dark felt wrong, like we were doing something we weren't supposed to be doing, even though the idea had come from a ranger himself. My headlamp caught glimpses of the creek through the trees, black water sliding silently over rocks. I kept expecting to see him again, to have him step out and confirm we'd done the right thing. He didn't. The night closed in fast. The sounds were different here, closer. The creek masked the distance, turning every rustle into something intimate. When we finally zipped the tent closed, the world outside felt uncomfortably near. Sometime after midnight, I woke up, not to a noise exactly, more like the absence of one. The creek had gone quiet. I held my breath and listened. From somewhere deeper in the trees, a radio crackled. Not words, just the brief, unmistakable burst of static you get when someone keys a mic by accident. Then nothing. I lay there, heart pounding, replaying the ranger's face in my mind, the uniform, the patch, the way everything about him had seemed right. Except for one thing I realized too late. He'd never told us his name. Morning didn't bring relief. The forest looked the same in daylight, but the feeling from the night before clung to everything, like a thin film you couldn't wipe away. The creek was running again, its steady sound almost mocking after the silence that had woken me. We packed slowly. Neither of us said much. Every so often, I'd catch my wife glancing toward the trees, like she expected someone to step out and tell us we'd done the right thing. No one did. By late morning, I decided to call Park Services, not to complain, not to report anything serious, just to confirm we'd followed the correct procedure. To hear someone official say, "Yes, that ranger was on duty. You listened. You're fine." The call went through after a few rings. "Park Services, how can I help you?" a man's voice answered. I explained the situation calmly. The campsite, the ranger's visit, being told to move to an overflow area. There was a pause. "Which ranger told you to relocate?" he asked. I hesitated. I don't know his name." Another pause, longer this time. "Can you describe him?" the man asked. I did. The uniform, the patch, the radio, the vehicle parked down the road that I'd barely noticed in the dark. Silence on the other end. Then, "Sir, there were no patrols assigned to that section last night." I laughed reflexively. "That can't be right. He was wearing full uniform." "I understand. the man said evenly. But according to our shift logs, no rangers were scheduled in that zone after 6 p.m. My stomach tightened. Then who was covering it? No one, he replied. I asked him about the overflow area by the creek. That location isn't designated for camping, he said. It hasn't been for years. I looked around at the clearing, the tire tracks, the flattened ground. It suddenly felt less like a campsite and more like evidence. What should we do now? I asked. He exhaled softly, like someone choosing their words carefully. I'd recommend returning to your assigned site, he said. And if you encounter anyone claiming to be staff, please request identification and contact us immediately. I hung up and sat there, phone in my hand, trying to process what he'd said. We'd moved because someone in authority told us to, and now, officially, that authority didn't exist. As we drove back towards Site C-17, the radio clicked on by itself. Static filled the cabin. Then a voice, low and close. You shouldn't have called. The transmission cut out instantly. I pulled the RV to a stop. My wife stared at me. Did you hear that? I nodded. Behind us, somewhere down the road, a radio crackled in response. Not words, just acknowledgement. We didn't turn around right away. I sat there with the engine idling, staring at the road ahead, replaying the dispatcher's words in my head. No patrols, no coverage, no one. The logic didn't line up with what we'd experienced, and that disconnect felt worse than if she'd confirmed something was wrong. Eventually, I put the RV back in gear. The drive back to Site C-17 felt shorter than it should have. The trees thinned sooner. The turns came back familiar. When the numbered posts reappeared, my chest loosened just a little, like we were returning to a place that followed rules again. Our site looked untouched. The fire ring was exactly how we'd left it. Damp ash, charred logs. Even the footprint from where I'd stood pouring water over the embers was still there, dark against the dirt. No tape, no closure sign. Nothing to suggest it had been unsafe. I parked and stepped out, scanning the area for movement. The forest was calm. Birds chirped overhead, too loudly, like they were trying to fill a silence that didn't belong there. Another ranger vehicle rolled slowly down the loop road. This one was unmistakably real, clearly marked, lights off, tires crunching on gravel. The ranger inside waved as he pulled up. "Morning," he said, stepping out. His uniform was slightly different, newer patch, body camera clipped to his chest. "Morning," I replied. "We were told to move last night." His expression shifted immediately. Not alarm, not confusion, concern. "Told by who?" he asked. I described the ranger from the night before again, every detail I could remember. The uniform, the radio, the warning. The ranger listened without interrupting, then shook his head. "No one was scheduled here after 6 p.m., he said. "That hasn't changed." I felt my stomach drop, even though I already knew the answer. "Sometimes people pretend," he continued. "They get old uniforms, old vehicles. Huffins more than you'd think." I asked him if that was common here. He hesitated. "Not here," he said. "Not this deep in." He pulled out a tablet and tapped through a few screens. "There's no record of any interaction logged last night," he added. "No welfare checks, no advisories." I told him about the overflow area by the creek. He looked up sharply. "You camped there?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "That area's off limits," he said. "Has been since an incident a few years back." "What kind of incident?" my wife asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "If someone directed you there, it wasn't one of ours." The words landed heavier, spoken out loud. He offered to walk the site with us, check for anything unusual. We agreed. As we circled the campsite, he paused near the tree line behind where our tent had been. "There," he said quietly. I followed his gaze. Carved into the bark of one of the pines was a symbol, faded, shallow, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. It wasn't a warning sign, it was a marker. The ranger stared at it longer than I expected, then took a photo with his tablet. "That shouldn't be here," he said. "Who put it there?" I asked. He didn't respond. Instead, his radio crackled softly. For just a second, I heard a familiar voice beneath the static. "Still checking?" The ranger's face went pale. He looked at me, then quickly turned the radio volume down. "We're done here," he said. "I suggest you pack up." "Is that an order?" I asked. He met my eyes. "It's advice," he said, "from someone who actually works here. We left the park within the hour. We didn't argue. We didn't ask for refunds or explanations. We packed with the kind of urgency that comes from knowing the window for questions is already closed." As we drove toward the exit, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see another ranger vehicle fall in behind us. None did. The road stayed empty all the way to the gate. The same ranger from the entrance booth was there when we checked out. He scanned our permit, tapped a few keys, and nodded. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, just for a second. "Yeah," I said. "We were advised to leave early." "By who?" he asked, without looking up. I watched his screen. "A ranger." He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then he finished the checkout and handed the permit back without another word. At home, life slowly returned to normal. The trip became something we referenced less and less, filed away as an unsettling experience we were glad was over. Until the email arrived. "Please rate your recent interaction with park staff." It looked automated, standard formatting, no sender name. I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. The survey listed one interaction: late evening welfare check. Beneath it was a name, not one I recognized, but next to it was a description that matched him exactly. Uniform, radio, patrol vehicle. I checked the timestamp. It matched the time he'd stood at the edge of our firelight. I forwarded the email to Park Services, explaining everything again. The response came the next morning. "There is no record of that staff member being assigned to your campground." Attached was a screenshot of the shift log. Empty. A week later, another email arrived. This one wasn't a survey. It was a notification. "Your feedback has been recorded. No option to reply." I stopped camping after that. Not because I'm afraid of the woods, but because every so often, I get another message. Reminder, please complete your post-visit evaluation. The interaction is always the same. Late evening, welfare check, and a ranger whose name never appears on any schedule. Someone spoke to us that night. The system just refuses to admit who. We arrived later than planned. By the time we pulled up to the campground entrance, the sky had already turned that dull, washed-out blue that comes right before full dark. The road behind us was empty, and the forest on either side felt heavier than it had earlier in the day. The gate was open, but barely. A small booth sat just past it, light glowing from inside. I parked and stepped out, stretching my legs while my wife stayed in the car. The attendant looked tired. Not unfriendly, just done with the day. "Checking in?" she asked. I handed over our reservation. She scanned it, nodded, and slid a laminated sheet across the counter. "Quiet hours start at 10, she said. "And once it's dark, no vehicle movement." I frowned slightly. "No movement at all?" "For safety," she replied immediately, like she'd said it 100 times already. "Wildlife, narrow roads, we've had incidents." She pointed toward a large sign mounted beside the booth. "No exit after dark for your safety." Below it, in smaller print, were a list of reasons. Deer crossings, limited visibility, emergency response delays. All of it sounded reasonable. "What if someone needs to leave?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Then they wait until morning." The answer was simple, final. She handed back our paperwork and circled our site number. "You'll be fine," she said. "Just settle in and stay put once the sun's down." We drove through the campground slowly, headlights sweeping over empty sites and parked trailers. Everything looked orderly, maintained, safe. Our site was near the back loop, far from the main gate. The road narrowed as we went, trees pressing closer together. By the time we parked, the last light had drained from the sky. I shut off the engine and listened. The forest was alive with sound. Crickets, distant movement, the kind of noise that makes you feel small but not threatened. We set up camp quickly, working from muscle memory. As I hammered the last stake into the ground, I noticed another sign posted near the road. No vehicle movement after dark. The wording was different, more direct. I glanced at my watch, 9:42 p.m. Cutting it close, my wife said, trying to sound casual. Yeah, I replied. The fire crackled to life just as the surrounding sites went dark, one by one. Engines off, lights out. The campground settled into a stillness that felt enforced rather than natural. I thought about the gate, about how narrow the road had been, about the attendant's tone when she'd said, "Then they wait until morning." At the time, it had sounded like reassurance. Now, sitting there with darkness pressing in from all sides, it felt more like a rule. And rules, I was learning, don't always care why you need to break them. The call came 10 minutes later. My phone buzzed on the picnic table beside the fire, the screen lighting up with my sister's name. I answered immediately. "Where are you?" she asked. Her voice was tight, breathless. "At a campground," I said. "What's wrong?" There was a pause on the line, filled with background noise. Sirens, maybe, or traffic. "It's Dad," she said. "He collapsed. The ambulance is here, but they're taking him to St. Mark's. You need to get here." The words landed hard enough that for a moment I couldn't respond. "I'm on my way," I said automatically. I stood up, already reaching for the car keys. My wife was on her feet instantly. "What happened?" "We have to leave," I said. "Now." We moved fast, too fast. The fire was still burning as I shoved things into the back of the car without any order. I didn't bother breaking down the tent properly. None of that mattered anymore. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine started. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the narrow road back toward the gate. And then I remembered the sign. No exit after dark. I drove anyway. We made it less than 100 yards before a bright beam of light washed over the windshield. A flashlight. The attendant from the booth stood in the road ahead of us, arm raised. I rolled down the window. "I need to leave. It's an emergency." She didn't lower the light. "I'm sorry," she said. "No vehicles are allowed to exit after dark." "My father is in an ambulance," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "This isn't recreational." She nodded, like she'd heard that exact phrasing before. "I understand," she said, "but the rule applies to everyone." I gestured back toward our site. "You can see the fire. We were just there." "That's why it's important you stay put," she replied. "It's safer for you here." "For who?" my wife asked. The attendant hesitated, then answered carefully. "For everyone." I asked her to open the gate. She shook her head. "I can't." I asked her who could. "No one," she said. "Not until morning." I felt something shift in my chest, a mix of anger and disbelief. "Call someone," I said. "A supervisor, a ranger, anyone." She lifted a radio clip to her belt and pressed the button. "Vehicle attempting to exit after dark," she said calmly. "Site B14. I froze. "That's not our site," I said. She looked at me, confused. "Yes, it is." "No," I replied. "We're C22. She frowned, checking a clipboard. Then she pressed the radio again. "Correction," she said. "Vehicle at site C22 attempting to exit after dark." The response came back immediately. Too immediately. "Negative," a voice said. "Do not release." The attendant lowered the radio. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "You'll have to wait." Behind her, the gate stayed firmly closed. And somewhere deeper in the campground, another engine shut off, deliberately. We sat there for a moment, the engine still running, the headlights fixed on the closed gate, like it might respond to persistence. It didn't. I turned the car around slowly and drove back toward the inner loop. The road felt narrower now, like it had subtly shifted while we weren't looking. When we passed our site, I noticed the fire had burned down to embers on its own. No smoke, no flame. Everything was quiet. "Okay," my wife said. "So we find another way out." I nodded, already pulling up the campground map on my phone. The signal was weak but present, just enough to load a static image. According to the map, there was a service road on the far side of the campground, used for maintenance and emergency access. Emergency access. That word felt promising. We followed the map's thin gray line deeper into the campground. The sites grew farther apart, the trees closer. Several spots were marked as closed, their entrances blocked by chains and reflective tape. The service road appeared suddenly, branching off behind a row of utility sheds. A heavy gate blocked it, locked. I got out of the car and walked up to it, shining my phone's flashlight along the metal bars. There was a keypad mounted on the post, dark and unresponsive. "Maybe it opens automatically," my wife suggested. I waited. Nothing happened. I tried the radio. The same calm voice answered. "Campground services." "There's a medical emergency," I said. "We're trying to exit through the service road." A pause. "That road is restricted after dark," the voice replied. "For safety reasons." "Safety for who?" I asked. "For you," the voice said, without hesitation. I told them about my father, about the ambulance, about the hospital. "I understand this is stressful," the voice replied, "but leaving at night puts you at greater risk." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're telling me staying is safer?" "Yes," the voice said. I looked around the dark clearing, the locked gate, the silent sheds. "This doesn't feel safe," I said. "You are currently in a controlled environment," the voice replied. "Please return to your site." The call ended before I could respond. As we turned back toward the inner loop, headlights flared ahead of us. Another vehicle was moving through the campground. Slowly, too slowly. It passed us without stopping, windows dark, no markings visible on the side. As it disappeared around a bend, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't heading toward the gate, it was heading deeper in. Back at our site, I sat on the edge of the picnic table, phone pressed to my ear, trying my sister again, straight to voicemail. I left a message I don't remember recording. The fire was completely out now. Around us, other campsites sat dark and still. No voices, no movement. I realized then that we weren't the only ones being told to stay. We were the only ones trying to leave. The scream cut through the campground just after midnight. It was distant, muffled by trees, but unmistakably human. Sharp enough to snap me upright from where I'd been sitting, staring at the dark road. My wife grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" Another sound followed, not a scream this time. A frantic, uneven shouting, carried by the wind in broken pieces. I stood up immediately. "That's coming from the north loop." Headlights flicked on in the distance. A beam swept through the trees, then disappeared. Somewhere, a radio crackled. I ran toward the road. A figure stumbled out of the darkness ahead of me, illuminated briefly by someone else's flashlight. A man, shirt torn, one arm held tight against his side. "Help!" he gasped. "She fell. She fell by the ravine." I grabbed his shoulder. "Where?" "North Trail," he said. "She slipped. We need to leave. We need to get her to a hospital." I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted back toward our site, shouting for my wife to grab the keys. The engine roared to life again. We barely made it halfway down the road before the attendant stepped out, blocking us once more. This time, she wasn't alone. Another staff member stood behind her, radio already raised. "There's been an accident," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone's injured. We're taking them out." The attendant didn't argue. She nodded. "This is why the rule exists," she said calmly. "Nighttime evacuations increase risk." "Someone could die," I shouted. She met my eyes. "Emergency responders are on the way." "Then open the gate," I said. "Let us help." She pressed the radio button. "Injury reported," she said. "Requesting protocol." The reply came instantly. "Negative," the voice said. "Maintain lockdown. Lockdown." The word echoed in my head. Behind us, the injured man collapsed to his knees in the road. Another camper knelt beside him, hands shaking, begging for help that wasn't coming fast enough. "Please," my wife said softly, "just open it." The attendant's expression didn't change. "For everyone's safety," she repeated. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, too faint. The man cried out again, clutching his side. Blood darkened his shirt under the glow of our headlights. I realized then what the rule really did. It didn't prevent accidents, it prevented movement. And anything that happened after dark was contained until morning. The gate stayed closed, the radios kept crackling, and we all waited in the dark, trapped by a rule designed to make sure nothing officially happened on the wrong side of it. Morning came quietly, too quietly. When the sun finally crept over the trees, the campground looked unchanged, peaceful even. Birds moved through the branches. Campers emerged from tents like the night before hadn't happened at all. The gate stood open. No cones, no attendants, no signs of a lockdown ever having existed. I drove straight to the exit without stopping, half expecting someone to step out and block us again. No one did. At the road, I pulled over and checked my phone. 6 missed calls from my sister. Dad had survived the night. Surgery had gone well. He was stable. Relief hit me so hard I had to put my head down on the steering wheel. Before leaving town, I stopped at the campground office. I asked about the accident from the night before, the injured camper, the lockdown. The woman behind the desk blinked at me. There were no reported incidents last night. I told her about the scream, the man bleeding on the road, the sirens. She typed for a moment, then shook her head. "Nothing in the system." "What about the gate?" I asked. "The rule about not leaving." She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. The policy was still there. "No vehicle movement after dark for your safety." "It's always been that way," she said. "It prevents liability." Liability. I asked about emergency exceptions. She frowned. "If we allowed people to leave during incidents, it would create risk." I thought about the man on his knees in the road, about the blood on his shirt, about how we'd all stood there, waiting for permission to help. As we drove away for the last time, I looked back at the campground sign. It didn't mention rules. It didn't mention safety, just a smiling family around a campfire. Since then, I've noticed how often places advertise safety, how many rules exist to protect people, and how easily those rules can become walls. Because that night, nothing bad officially happened. No reports, no incidents, no liability. And that's exactly why no one was allowed to leave. The trip itself wasn't scary. That's the part that makes everything else harder to explain. Because if you were there with us, you would have called it a good weekend. Quiet, clean air, a campsite that looked exactly like the photos online. We'd booked 3 nights at a state-run campground 2 hours from home. Nothing remote, just a place with a fire ring, a picnic table, and enough distance from traffic that you could sleep through the night without hearing engines. Check-in was normal. We pulled up to the booth, gave our name, and the attendant found us in the system without hesitation. She printed a small receipt, tore off a tag for our dashboard, and circled our site number with a pen like it mattered. "Site D9, she said. "You're good through Monday." Then she slid another paper across the counter, a single-page rule sheet. Quiet hours, fire restrictions, trash policy, the usual. As she handed it to me, she added something almost as an afterthought. "Make sure you check out properly when you leave." I nodded like I always do. There was nothing about the way she said it that sounded ominous. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was the kind of sentence that belongs in the background of a normal life. We drove to our site and set up in the late afternoon. The campground was busy but not crowded. A few families cooking dinner, someone playing music quietly on a speaker, kids riding bikes in slow loops between the sites. We cooked over the fire that night and watched the flames burn down into coals. The sky was clear, the stars sharp enough to make you forget you lived under streetlights most of the year. The next day, we hiked a short trail that looped around a lake and came back just before sunset. Nothing happened. No weird noises, no strange people, no unexplained footprints outside the tent, just a normal campground. On the second night, a light rain moved in, soft and steady. It made everything quieter, the kind of sound that should have been relaxing. We fell asleep early. By Sunday morning, we both felt rested in a way that made the idea of going back to work feel unreal. We ate breakfast, packed slowly, and decided to leave a day early. There was nothing dramatic about the decision. No emergency, no panic. We just wanted our own bed. As I loaded the last bag into the car, I remembered the attendant's voice from check-in. Make sure you check out properly. I looked toward the front gate. It was still early, plenty of time, and I still didn't think it mattered. We left just after 9. The campground was already thinning out, cars pulling away one by one, engines echoing briefly before disappearing down the main road. It felt like the natural end of a weekend, not an early departure. The check-in booth was empty when we reached it, lights off, window closed. A small sign taped to the glass read, "Checkout drop box. Please leave permit tag." I slowed the car and leaned out the window, scanning for anyone nearby. No attendant, no ranger, just the quiet shuffle of leaves across the pavement. "There's a box," my wife said, pointing. I parked and stepped out, permit tag in hand. The metal box was bolted to the side of the booth, scratched and dented from years of use. A narrow slot ran across the top. I hesitated. The tag had our site number printed clearly on it, D9. I slid it through the slot and heard it clatter inside. That was it. No receipt, no confirmation, no screen flashing checkout complete. We drove out through the open gate without stopping. The road back felt ordinary. Cell service returned within minutes. Notifications buzzed in all at once, dragging us back into regular life. By noon, we were home. I unpacked the car, tossed the camping gear into the garage, and didn't think about the trip again until Tuesday morning, when an email popped up in my inbox. "Thank you for staying with us." I almost deleted it without opening it. Automated messages like that were easy to ignore. But one line caught my eye. "Your stay is currently active." I refreshed the page, convinced I'd misread it. The email continued. "If you have already departed, please ensure that you complete the checkout process to avoid additional charges." I clicked the reservation link. The page loaded slowly, then displayed our booking details. Check-in, Friday. Checkout, pending. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Maybe the system just hadn't updated yet, I told myself. Drop boxes get emptied manually. Someone would process it later. That night, another email arrived. "Reminder, you are still checked in." I closed the laptop and went to bed. At that point, it was still an inconvenience, nothing more. And I still believed it would fix itself. The first charge was small, $5, labeled as a maintenance fee. I noticed it while scanning my bank statement later that week and almost missed it entirely. The merchant name matched the campground, and the amount was low enough that I assumed it was some kind of delayed adjustment. I didn't dispute it. 2 days later, another email arrived. Extended stay notice. The wording was polite, neutral. It thanked us for continuing to use the campground facilities and reminded us that additional nights would be billed automatically. I logged back into the reservation portal. The page looked exactly the same as before. Check-in, Friday. Checkout, pending. Status, active. There was no button to force a checkout. No option to mark ourselves as having left. Just a customer service number listed at the bottom of the page. I called it during my lunch break. After navigating a menu of recorded options, I reached a woman who introduced herself and asked for my reservation number. I gave it to her, explaining that we'd left early and dropped our permit in the box. She typed for a moment. "I'm showing your stay is still active," she said. "Yes," I replied. "That's the problem." She paused, then said, "According to our records, there's no logged departure." I asked her what that meant. "It means the system still has you checked in," she said. "Once the Dropbox is processed, it should update." "When does that happen?" I asked. "It depends," she said. "Sometimes a few days, sometimes longer." Another charge hit the card that night. This one was larger, a full nightly rate. I called again. This time, the person on the other end sounded more tired than helpful. He repeated the same explanation, the same phrases, like he was reading from a script he didn't believe in either. "There's nothing we can do until the system updates," he said. "So I'm being charged for a campsite I'm not using," I said. "I understand why that's frustrating," he replied. "But according to our records, you're still there." That sentence stuck with me. Not "you were there." Not "you had been there." You're still there. I checked the portal again before bed. A new line had appeared under our reservation details. Occupancy confirmed. I stared at it, the glow of the screen filling the dark room. Somewhere, in a system I couldn't see, we were still sitting at Site D9, still active, still present. And the charges kept coming. By the second week, it stopped feeling like a mistake. Mistakes get corrected. They trigger apologies. This didn't. It just continued, steady and indifferent. Another charge appeared. Another email followed. Reminder, active stay in progress. I called again, this time asking to speak to a supervisor. The hold music looped twice before someone new picked up. Her tone was calm, practiced. "I understand your concern," she said after I explained everything. "But I'm looking at your account right now, and there is no record of a completed checkout." "We left," I said. "We turned in the permit. We drove out. We're home." "I don't doubt that," she replied. "But without a recorded departure, the stay remains open." I asked what counted as a recorded departure. "A ranger sign-off," she said, "or a verified booth checkout." "The booth was empty," I said. "Then the system wouldn't have been able to log it," she answered. I felt my patience thin. "So what do I do now?" There was a brief pause. "You would need to return to the campground and complete a proper checkout." The words hit harder than they should have. "That was weeks ago," I said. "We don't live anywhere near there." "I understand," she said again, "but that's the only way to close an active stay." I asked what would happen if I didn't. She hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. "Then the system will continue to bill according to policy," she said, "and the stay will remain active." I hung up and stared at my phone. Returned to a place I'd already left, just to prove to a system that I wasn't still there. I checked the campground's website. The seasonal notice had been updated. Campground closed for maintenance. No dates, no explanation. The reservation portal, however, still showed our stay as active. I called again and told them the campground was closed. "Yes," the representative said, "but your stay began before closure." "So I can't check out," I said. "That's correct," she replied. "Not until the location reopens." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was suddenly very clear. The system didn't care whether the campground existed in reality. It only cared that, according to its records, I was still there. Eventually, we stopped arguing with it. The charges kept coming for a while, not every day, not aggressively, just often enough to remind me that, somewhere, our stay was still ongoing. I canceled the card tied to the reservation and thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The emails changed tone. Payment method declined. Outstanding balance. Action required to avoid further penalties. I called again, expecting escalation, threats, collections. Instead, the woman on the line sounded almost apologetic. "The account is still active," she said. "We can't close it with an outstanding balance." "So I owe money for a place that doesn't exist anymore?" I asked. She didn't correct me. Months passed. The campground disappeared from the booking site entirely. Its page redirected to a generic notice about seasonal restructuring. No photos, no map, no reviews. But our reservation page still loaded. Site D9, status, active. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not a bill, not a notice, a survey. Please rate your stay. I laughed when I saw it, out loud. The sound surprised me. The questions were simple. How clean was your site? How would you rate staff friendliness? Would you recommend this campground to others? At the bottom was one final question. Have you completed your stay? Yes. No. I closed the browser without answering. A week later, another email arrived. Reminder, your stay is still active. I don't camp anymore. Not because I'm afraid of the woods, but because I learned something I can't unlearn. You can leave a place. You can drive away. You can pack up everything you brought with you. But if the system doesn't record your exit, according to it, you're still there. That wasn't unusual for me. I'd done solo trips plenty of times before, especially when I just needed a few days away from noise, screens, and people who expected explanations. This campground wasn't remote or extreme. It was a regulated site, well-maintained, with numbered plots and a central office that closed promptly at dusk. Everything about it felt controlled. At the entrance booth, the ranger scanned my reservation and nodded. He typed something into the computer, then tore a tag from a small stack and handed it to me. Once you arrive at your site, we'll mark it as occupied, he said, not looking up. I clipped the tag to the corner of my dashboard. What happens when I leave? I asked casually. He paused, then answered like it was something he'd said many times before. Occupancy has to be cleared before departure, he said. Just make sure you return the tag. That was it. No warning, no emphasis, just procedure. My site was E11. I took another photo. The site, empty. Tent packed. Fire ring cold. No trash. No sign I'd ever been there at all. I returned the dashboard tag to the Dropbox at the office, heard it fall inside, and drove out through the open gate. As the road curved away from the campground, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The sign stood there, unchanged. I didn't think about it again for weeks, at least not until the email arrived. Part 2. The email didn't sound urgent. That was the first thing I noticed. No warning icons, no bold text, just a neutral subject line that looked like it belonged to a routine system check. Please confirm your status at Site E11. I opened it, expecting a survey or a delayed receipt. Instead, it thanked me for my recent stay and explained that the campground was performing a routine occupancy audit. According to their records, my site was still listed as occupied. I stared at the sentence longer than I should have. At first, I assumed it was automated, some lag between systems, a checkbox that hadn't been updated yet. I replied with a short message explaining that I'd already checked out and returned the tag. I even attached the photos, one of the empty site, one of the dashboard tag, taken just before I dropped it into the box. I hit send and went back to work. 2 days passed before I heard back. Thank you for your response, the email read. At this time, our system is still showing active occupancy at Site E11. Still showing. The phrasing bothered me, not because it accused me of anything, but because it treated the system's view as reality. I called the number listed at the bottom of the email. After a few minutes on hold, a ranger answered. His voice was calm, professional, and slightly distant, like he was already reading from a screen. I see your reservation, he said. It hasn't been cleared yet. I sent photos, I replied. The site was empty when I left. I understand, he said, but photos don't confirm departure. What does? I asked. A cleared occupancy record, he said, without hesitation. I asked him to explain what that meant. When a site is vacated, he said, the system needs confirmation that no one remains. That's what I'm telling you, I said. No one was there. He paused, then said something that made my stomach tighten. Our records indicate that someone may still be present. Someone. Not me, not a clerical error. Someone. I told him there had been no one else at my site. I'd camped alone. I'd packed everything. I'd left nothing behind. I'm not saying you're wrong, he replied. I'm saying the occupancy hasn't been cleared. I asked what would happen next. We'll need to verify the site, he said. Until then, it will remain listed as occupied. And my name? I asked. It stays attached to the record, he said. After the call ended, I logged back into the portal. The reservation was still there. Site E11. Status: occupied. Occupant: my name. I closed the laptop, suddenly aware of how quiet the room felt. I wasn't at the campground, but according to them, someone still was. And whoever that was, they were listed under my name. Part 3. The ranger called me 2 days later. He said they'd gone out to verify the site. I walked E11 myself, he told me. There's no one there. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So it's cleared? There was a pause. Physically, yes, he said, but the record hasn't updated. I asked him to explain. The system flags discrepancies, he said. When occupancy doesn't match expected behavior, it requires additional confirmation. Expected behavior? I repeated. For example, he continued, when a camper checks out, the record closes within a standard window. Yours didn't. I reminded him that I'd returned the tag, that I'd sent photos, that he'd just confirmed the site was empty. I'm not disputing any of that, he said, but from the system's perspective, the departure wasn't completed. What does it think happened? I asked. Another pause, longer this time. It indicates unresolved presence, he said carefully. Unresolved presence. That phrase followed me for the rest of the day. Later that afternoon, I received another email. This one wasn't a notice or a reminder. It was labeled as a safety update. Due to unconfirmed occupancy, Site E11 will remain flagged. No time frame, no instructions, just a statement. I logged into the portal again. The details had changed. Status: occupied. Verification: incomplete. Safety flag: active. I called back immediately. A different ranger answered this time. She sounded younger, less rehearsed. I don't understand why this isn't clearing, she admitted. The site's empty. Then remove my name, I said. I can't, she replied. It's part of the audit trail. What does that mean? I asked. It means the record can't be altered without closing the occupancy, she said. And we can't close the occupancy without confirming departure. You just confirmed it, I said. In person, she replied. Not in the system. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So what happens now? I asked. She hesitated. We monitor the site. For what? I asked. For movement, she said. After the call, I checked the portal one last time before bed. A new line had appeared beneath my name. Occupant status: unresolved. I wasn't at the campground. Everyone agreed on that. But the system was still waiting for something to leave. Part 4. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They surfaced quietly, the way administrative problems usually do, sideways, in places you don't expect. The first time I noticed something was wrong outside the campground was when I tried to book another site a few weeks later. Different state, different park, same system. I selected my dates, chose a site, and clicked confirm. A red banner appeared at the top of the page. Unable to complete reservation. Active occupancy detected. I refreshed the page and tried again. Same message. I called the booking hotline and explained the situation, starting from the beginning. The representative listened patiently, then asked me to hold while she checked my profile. When she came back, her tone had shifted. I'm seeing an unresolved occupancy under your name, she said. At a different campground, I replied. Months ago. Yes, she said. It hasn't been cleared. So I can't book anything else, I asked. Not until the active stay is closed, she replied. I contacted Park Services again, escalating through every number I could find. Each conversation ended the same way. They acknowledged the site was empty. They acknowledged I wasn't there. They acknowledged the record still showed occupancy. One ranger finally explained it in terms that made sense. "Your name is attached to a location," he said. "Until that attachment is resolved, the system treats you as present. Present, not camping, not visiting. Present." I asked what would resolve it. "A confirmed departure," he said. "From where?" I asked. "From the site," he replied. I reminded him the campground was closed for the season. "I know," he said. "That complicates things." Complicates things. Weeks passed. The campground's page was eventually archived. Photos disappeared. Maps stopped loading. But my record didn't move. Site E11. Occupant. My name. Status. Active. One night, I logged into the portal and noticed a new field I hadn't seen before. Monitoring status. Ongoing. I stared at it, unsure whether it was new or if I'd just never noticed it before. I wasn't afraid of the campground anymore. I was afraid of being permanently listed somewhere I couldn't return to. According to the system, I hadn't left, and until I did, nothing else would let me arrive. Part 5. I stopped trying to clear it after that. Not because anyone told me to, not because I ran out of numbers to call, but because every explanation eventually circled back to the same sentence. You're still listed as present. The campground reopened the following spring under a slightly different name. Same road, same entrance, new signage. I considered driving back, just to stand at site E11 and prove something to myself, but I never did. By then, the system had already adjusted around me. When I try to book a campsite now, the message is always the same. Active occupancy detected. When I contact support, they don't sound confused anymore. They sound certain. There's an unresolved location associated with your profile, they tell me. Until that's cleared, your status won't change. I asked once what would happen if someone else tried to use site E11. They can't, a ranger said. It's still occupied. By me. I've never been charged. I've never been fined. No one has ever accused me of anything. I just exist somewhere I can't return to. Sometimes, I receive automated messages asking me to confirm my status. Are you still at the site? There's no option to answer yes or no, just a reminder that the question is still open. I used to think leaving a place meant packing up and driving away. Now I know better. You don't leave until the system agrees that you did. And according to it, I'm still there. If you're still listening, take a moment before you move on. Not because these stories are over, but because they don't really end. Every place you've heard about tonight followed the rules. Every system was built for safety, and every person did exactly what they were supposed to do. They checked in, they complied, they left. At least, they thought they did. Because sometimes, leaving isn't a physical act. It's an administrative one. And if the system never records your exit, then somewhere, according to it, you're still there. The next story is worse.